ain't no way for me to give you all you need. If you won't let me give all of me, I know that a woman's duty is to have that loving man, and that's the way it was made. Oh, but how can I give you all the things I can if you're tired both of my hands? Oh, it ain't no way. Ain't no way. It ain't no way. Ain't no way. It just ain't no way, baby. Ain't no way. Ain't no way, baby. Ain't no way. It ain't no way.
Ain't no fucking way. Ain't no way. That's the main thing that I pulled away from that entire series. So what's up, everybody? Come on in. I see Thickness is already here. I see Cynical's already here. How's everybody doing? I don't know if many of you watched that Jeffrey Dahmer series. It's on Netflix. Anytime these type of things happen, like there's a series about a big crime event, I'm very skeptical about watching it. Hollywood has the tendency to, I don't know, add a bunch of bullshit to kind of pad out the runtime. So I was already suspicious about that. I was already like, I don't know how I feel about this. But I was open-minded. It was going viral, on Twitter. Everybody kept talking about it, and I'm more on Twitter than I am on YouTube, especially nowadays. And I was like, you know what? Let me give it a shot, because I really didn't know much about Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, I was born in '89. By the time I even realized his relevance to the American history, he was long dead. And all I needed to know was he was a weirdo who ate people who was dead. So who cares? That was my attitude. Somewhere a few years ago when I was studying forensic psychology, of course, Jeffrey Dahmer, the John Wayne Gacy's, the Ed Geins, you kind of come across those stories because that's just a part of it. Even at that stage in my career, I was still not really interested in a Jeffrey Dahmer. It's something about cannibalism is just really fucking gross. So I wasn't interested in really looking him up. Then I checked out this series. Okay, there was a lot of fabrication. We're going to talk about those fabrications in a little bit. But I'm more pissed off by the fuck shit I saw on the internet. Because people have been playing on it, like on the internet, regarding this whole Jeffrey Dahmer situation. A lot of those divester chicks, y'all are horrible human beings. Like, just, it's almost like everyone has a horrible take regarding this whole situation. And this happened like 30 plus years ago. How can you still have a horrible take? So let's kind of go in to the agenda. This is how I'm going to handle this. I feel like we need to get a better understanding about Jeffrey Dahmer. I think people need to understand clinically what's going on here before we can start talking about the other stuff. Because we're going to talk about the other stuff, but I want us to get a good clinical understanding of what's happening. I was listening to Lasheed's stream earlier, and check out Lasheed for you. She has a very interesting stream about Jeffrey Dahmer. She gonna take it down. She don't like that kind of energy around her channel, but it was a pretty good stream, and hopefully she'll be able to come up a little bit later. But here's the thing. With Jeffrey Dahmer, a lot of people are like, oh, is he crazy? And you got to understand, in clinical settings, we don't use the word crazy. Behind the scenes, we may call, somebody crazy. We're not going to call a patient crazy, but we'll typically point out things that are bizarre. They can't be really, we can't really describe it in an assessment. We can't really put it in clinical terms. It's just some weird shit. For example, eating people. Like, yeah, we can put cannibalism on your, psychosocial assessment, but it's just some weird shit that we really don't really understand, to be quite honest with you. With Jeffrey Dahmer, he was not psychotic when he did these things. And that's one of the great things that the series pointed out. He was not under any type of psychoses. When you think psychoses, think distortion in reality. I think I talked about this last time. I'm going to learn you guys some psychology coming on my channel. When a person is under any type of psychoses, they're not in tune with reality. Think, that delusional thinking. People think that people are after them. They're paranoid. They're seeing shit. They're hearing shit. Like, that wasn't going on with Jeffrey Dahmer. And there's reasons why we know that was not happening. Because with Jeffrey Dahmer, he kept changing his strategy and adding new elements to his strategy. Initially, he was just drugging people. Then he started drugging them and drilling holes and shit in their head. He was able to change his strategy to get more people to come to his apartment. So he wasn't under any type of delusion. There was no command hallucinations. This was a person who had a seriously cruel attitude when it came down to the human experience. He had an antisocial personality disorder, and he had a sexual paraphilia. So those things are under the Axis 2 section. This isn't something like a psychosis or depression, even though depression was probably involved. Definitely was a fucking alcoholic. But his real issue was he was antisocial. When you think antisocial, think of what they used to call, sociopaths. People who lack empathy, who can hurt people and not really give a shit. And honestly, those people usually are passive narcissists. Now, passive narcissists, I encourage people to look up passive narcissists because you're probably going to encounter those a lot in life. Passive narcissists are people who are always the victim, even when they're hurting people. Like a person cheats on you and say, well, the reason why I did it is because all of the things you did to me and you're always hurting me, so I had to hurt you. They always find a reason to justify their actions, and they always find a way to highlight their victimhood, even when they're doing fucked up shit. Jeffrey Dahmer would always point out his victimhood. He would always point out, everyone hates me, everyone's after me, everyone's trying to take me out, even though he's out here eating niggas and shit. So we're going to play a video from Dr. Grande. I love Dr. Grande. I encourage you all to subscribe to Dr. Grande because Dr. Grande he has very dry humor, but like he's a funny kind of a dude, and he's really good in analyzing these big cases. One of the best cases that he did a breakdown of was the Leaving Neverland situation. He also did an amazing breakdown of the Columbine killers. Very talented doctor. So we're going to play a little bit of Dr. Grande's video just so we get an idea of some of the symptoms, some of the behaviors. And we're going to I don't want to do this in a Hollywood way. I didn't want to play clips from the movie. I didn't want to play any of that. I didn't even want to play clips from a documentary. I wanted a professional to kind of give you a good understanding of what we're dealing with before we get into the mess. So hold on 1 second.
Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can look at the mental health and personality characteristics of Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the most notorious serial killers in the history of the United States. He was born in 1960 and died in 1994. He was an active serial killer from 1978 to 1991. He committed 17 murders. All of his victims were male, ages 14 to 31, and most were African American. Now, I'm going to go through the timeline here and then take a look at the mental health and personality factors. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer, of course, was a real person, so I'm not diagnosing anybody here, just speculating on what could have been happening in a situation like this. So Jeffrey Dahmer was born in Wisconsin. He lived in Iowa for a while, and then his family moved to Ohio. In his early life, he was neglected. His parents argued. Depending on what records you look at, either in 1964 or in 1966, he developed a double hernia in his scrotum. And this was extremely painful, and he had to have surgery, and the recovery from the surgery was painful. In 1966, his parents moved into separate bedrooms in the same house, so they were having a lot of marital problems. In 1968, it was possible that he was assaulted by a neighbor, but we don't really have clear evidence of this. We do know that around the same time, he took an interest in dead animals. So he liked to dismember dead animals, take all the flesh off the bones, keep the bones, arrange the bones. So he really had a fascination with what was inside of the animals' bodies. Now, from what we can tell, he didn't actually murder these animals. These animals were roadkill. He found them dead, and then he would dismember them and do all these other things. Now, by 1970, so we're talking about when he was around 10 years old, he increased his activity of collecting roadkill. He bleached the bones of chickens. He kept insects in bottles of formaldehyde. He decapitated small rodents, and he learned to use acid to strip the flesh off the bones of dead animals. So he really just expanded on his earlier interest and behavior surrounding dead animals. Now, during his early school years, he did get in trouble a lot at school.
I wanted to pause it for a second because Dr. Grande left out this very interesting fact. His father taught him how to dismember these animals. It was a bonding experience that they did. This wasn't just in the series, this was also reported. So mind you, this wasn't just something that he picked up later in life. His father would collect possums, raccoons, all kinds of weird shit. And as a family, they would dissect these creatures. The mother wasn't involved in this. Also, interesting fact, the mother had attempted suicide multiple times. Clearly, the mother had some serious mental health issues. Don't really know all the details there, but it gives an impression that there's some type of history of mental health issues within the family.
He used to shout out strange things at unusual times, make animal noises. He conducted a lot of pranks, and he used to fake seizures. In 1974, he started high school, and this is where he began to have fantasies of sex with a corpse. And his drinking, which had already started before this, increased in high school. His classmates considered him a loner and an alcoholic. Evidently, he was drinking scotch in class. Now, he indicated that he tried to overcome a lot of thoughts in this time frame, obsessive thoughts at around age 15 or 16. And these were thoughts, of course, as I mentioned, of having sex with a corpse and of engaging in murder. Now, according to Dahmer, he first had a plan to murder somebody when he was 16, but the person didn't show up when he thought they would show up. So it was 1978, after his parents divorced, when he would pick up a 19-year-old hitchhiker, Stephen Hicks, and take him back to his house, Dahmer's house. And when Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer hit him with a barbell and then strangled him with that barbell. He removed all of the flesh from the bones, smashed the bones, and buried the remains in his backyard. So this night.
Pause. How fucking evil do you have to be to kill somebody at 18, dismember them, and like do all this, like basically strip the bones and then pulverize it with a sledgehammer at 18? That's a lot. That's a lot for an 18-year-old to do. I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm just saying that's a lot.
1878 murder of Stephen Hicks was Dahmer's first murder. In December of 1978, Dahmer went into the army. He served as a medic in West Germany. His drinking became even worse, and he was eventually discharged for that reason in 1981. He spent some time in Florida directly after being discharged, but then moved back to Ohio just a few months later. Now, later in that same year, 1981, he was arrested for disorderly conduct, having an open alcohol container, and resisting arrest. In 1982, he was arrested for drunken disorderly conduct, and then he moved in with his grandmother in Wisconsin. In early 1983, he got a job in a chocolate factory, and we see in 1986, he was arrested for lewd and lascivious behavior in Milwaukee and sentenced to 1 year of probation. In 1987, Dahmer killed a 24-year-old man in a hotel room. He claims he had no memory of this. He disposed of the body in a similar way as to what we saw in 1978. And the remains.
In the series, they show this in a very interesting way. They basically show that Jeffrey Dahmer, after like almost a decade of being inactive, takes this guy back to this hotel. Mind you, before Dahmer took this man to the hotel, he used to go to the bathhouses in Milwaukee. But when he went to those bathhouses, he was drugging those guys. And it was a predominantly white environment. Mostly the people that he was drugging were white. Those people didn't die, but some of them overdosed, and word had got around, and then he got banned from those areas. It's interesting how the white gay community was able to basically get this nigga up out of there. Then he found the black gay community, and he had to have stuck it out like a damn sore thumb, if you think about it. Like, he's super awkward, very white, in this very black environment. I'm just surprised that nobody put two and two together, but let's keep it going.
Remains of this body have never been found. In 1988, he killed both a 14-year-old male and a 25-year-old male. He moved out of his grandmother's house into an apartment and assaulted a 13-year-old and was arrested. In 1989, he was sentenced for that crime and eventually would end up serving 10 months in prison. But before that, he would kill another individual, a 24-year-old male, in March of 1989. In 1990, he would murder 4 more victims, and in 1991, he murdered 8 more victims. On July 22nd, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was trying to murder another male victim, and this person escaped, flagged down a police car, and the police searched Dahmer's apartment. They found body parts, and they found photos of victims. Evidently, at this time, when the police were there in his apartment, he was combative and angry, but of course they did arrest him. And in 1992, we see all these hearings trying to determine if Dahmer could stand trial or if he qualified as insane for insanity defense. But with all this, he was still convicted and sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms. And later on, he would be sentenced to a 16th life sentence for the murder of his first victim, Stephen Hicks. Dahmer went to prison to start serving his multiple life sentences, and he was killed by another murderer named Christopher Scarver. Christopher Scarver killed Jeffrey Dahmer in the shower using a metal pipe, and he also killed another inmate just after killing Jeffrey Dahmer. So that's the timeline for Jeffrey Dahmer. What about the mental health and personality aspects? Well, in terms of the mental health, I mentioned these hearings to determine if Jeffrey Dahmer was sane. And when these occurred, we had a number of mental health professionals that testified to all these different potential diagnoses. So
this is not uncommon. You can have multiple professionals come up with a myriad of different diagnoses for especially a patient like this. Like, sometimes it's pretty obvious what's going on. But this kind of a case, I mean, you're going to see multiple different type of psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, social workers, and each one of them are going to have their own opinion about what's going on, but they kind of all intersect at some point.
There's actually some agreement between them, but a lot of disagreement. We see diagnoses thrown out there like borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, psychotic disorder, necrophilia, alcohol dependence, which is now, of course, called substance use disorder, antisocial personality disorder not otherwise specified, which, of course, doesn't exist in the current DSM. But we see what they're trying to do here was say that he had personality disorder traits like borderline obsessive compulsive and sadistic traits. So we really see kind of a lot of mystery around what was going on in terms of his mental health. We see other mental health professionals at the time that believed he had no mental disorders. And in prison, we see that they were treating him under the diagnosis of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So we see a lot of confusion in terms of what was going on diagnostically. Now, if you look at his statements, Jeffrey Dahmer admitted that he had compulsions, but didn't typically refer to them as voices or commands or anything like that, at least not in the evidence that I could find. He talked about wanting a feeling of.
I want to break something down, the difference between a compulsion and a command hallucination. People who smoke cigarettes, that's a compulsion. It's an urge to want to do something. A command hallucination is a voice, a vision, something telling you to complete an act. So just to make that distinction between the two.
Control, power, domination, and that when he pursued these feelings, when he gave into these feelings, he felt fear and pleasure. He indicated that when he committed these murders, he wasn't angry, he wasn't doing it for revenge, that he didn't hate anybody. And he describes kind of all these activities in a very matter-of-fact way. He indicates that he felt that the victims were a part of him, and we see the same type of wording used by Ted Bundy. Dahmer indicated that these murders were really the only thing that gave him satisfaction. He also seemed to take responsibility to some degree after being arrested. He said there was no one else to blame for his 13-year murder spree. He indicated there was no point in trying to hide his actions any longer. And he also said that if he was put back out in the street, he would commit the crimes again. He couldn't think of any way that he would stop committing murder. So in a sense,
Pause. I wanted to pause that because suffer no delusion. He was trying to hide what he was doing for decades, or over a decade at least. So it's not like he turned himself in. He slipped up. Another one of his victims escaped. This one actually got to the police, and that's how they caught him. So it's not like he just admitted to all things. And later in this stream, we're going to talk about a murder that isn't a part of the official count of murders, but he definitely did that shit. So we're going to let Dr. Grande wrap things up.
when you look at him being interviewed, he seems truthful. He appears to answer spontaneously, perhaps somewhat embarrassed or ashamed of some of his activities, and he didn't really have a clear agenda. For example, we never heard anything about him trying to get an appeal. He seemed to accept that he would be in prison for life. He actually stated that. So what was going on here in terms of the mental health and personality? Well, of course, we can only speculate at this point. We see many different opinions from the mental health clinicians that interviewed him, which is actually a common problem when we see this intersection of mental health and the law, right? You have people hired by the state and then people hired by the defense, and they end up having different conclusions diagnostically. It does point out the imprecision and lack of knowledge in the mental health professions, right? When these things happen, it's always a little bit worrisome to see professionals come up with all types of different diagnoses. Now, when you talk about a murder trial like this, or these hearings to determine sanity, these are high stakes. These mental health clinicians were well paid. And theoretically, you would believe they're doing their best work. And yet they couldn't seem to agree on many important points about Jeffrey Dahmer's mental health diagnoses. So I'm going to give my thoughts on what could have been going on here. But again, I never got to meet him in person. And these other mental health professionals, even though they had a lot of different diagnostic impressions, they actually did interview him. So in terms of personality, I'll conceptualize his personality using the 5-factor model. Again, what could be happening. That is a model that has 5 big traits. I remember them through the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So in terms of openness to experience, it would seem like Jeffrey Dahmer had high openness to experience. He did seem adventurous and perhaps psychotic, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And he had a lot of fantasy. So highly consistent with being elevated on the openness to experience trait. In terms of conscientiousness, he had fairly low conscientiousness. He gave in to impulses. He was arrested frequently. He did keep a job for a while, and he seemed organized in some other ways, but in general, I would say low conscientiousness. Now, with extroversion, his extroversion was low, so he was introverted. He kept to himself, but he was able to demonstrate a degree of superficial charm when needed. And this becomes important a little bit later. I'll talk about this. Now, in terms of agreeableness, his agreeableness was actually fairly low. He was combative and antagonistic, but he could appear to be agreeable. So when people met him, he seemed relatively friendly and inviting. So again, we see some deception components here. For neuroticism, the last trait, his neuroticism appears to be extremely low, which is consistent with psychopathy. Now, when we talk about psychopathy, we see this report that he was tested for psychopathy, but fell short of the cutoff score to qualify as psychopathic. But I think it seems pretty clear now that Jeffrey Dahmer was, in fact, psychopathic. That seems to be a reasonable guess. He had a lack of empathy, he was sensation-seeking, manipulative, and deceitful.
And this is where I get off the bus with Dr. Grande. I'm going to let him finish, of course, but I don't necessarily see any psychoses. Psychoses comes in stages and it cycles out. This nigga wasn't cycling out. Every night that he went to the club looking for a victim, he was not under any some type of psychoses. When you're under psychoses, your reality is distorted. His reality wasn't distorted when he was crushing those pills and slipping it in people's drinks. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't under any type of psychoses when he was chopping people up and melting them in acid. So I don't necessarily agree with any type of psychoses here. Maybe, some intermittent psychoses when he's like really hopped up on drugs, but I don't necessarily subscribe to this analysis. But hey, professionals have different opinions, so I'm going to let him finish.
So he had a number of the characteristics that we see associated with psychopathy, and he actually had a few others too, like being irresponsible and impulsive. So looking at the mental health aspects, again, we see many potential diagnostic impressions. His presentation was quite confusing to the mental health clinicians that talked to him. So I'm going to look at each of these diagnoses that he was given at some point and kind of give my thoughts on the factors that point toward him having the diagnosis and some factors that maybe don't line up with the diagnostic impression. So first, I'll kind of start with the easy ones, right? Substance use disorder, in terms of specifically alcohol. This seems pretty clear that he had this. Necrophilia, it seems pretty clear that he had necrophilia. Now, I think it's also likely he had antisocial personality disorder. We see conduct disorder symptoms before the age of 15, which would be required for that diagnosis. We see criminality, deceitfulness, a lack of remorse, aggressiveness, a reckless disregard for the safety of others, being irresponsible, and being impulsive. So really, an argument can be made that he meets all 7 of the symptom criteria for antisocial personality disorder. Now, moving on to borderline personality disorder, this one is much more controversial. And we see people that kind of strongly fall into opposite camps in terms of their positions with this disorder and Jeffrey Dahmer. I think that what makes people believe that he could have had borderline is this claim that he acted violently when somebody tried to leave. So this idea that he would go and invite these men to have sex with them at his apartment or wherever. And when they wanted to leave, that's when he became violent. Almost like maybe he wasn't planning to kill them all along, which is a possibility because some he did let go. So again, this is unclear for many people, but some people really believed.
See, this is also where I think he's wrong. I think Jeffrey Dahmer was closer to an incel because he wasn't really having sex with these people. He would bring them home, slip them the Mickey, suffocate them, and then, this is gross, trigger warning, but we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, come on now. Masturbate on them, on their corpses. That ain't sex. That's some weird necrophiliac incel shit. So I think for the most part, he was an incel and he wasn't always successful. You got to bear in mind, like, I don't think a lot of people would go in that apartment because it smelled like shit and he's creepy. So I think a lot of people would have been triggered as they went to his apartment, like, I'm not feeling this anymore. And then they'll turn around. So everybody didn't go inside, but I think everybody who went inside, they met their end.
That he had borderline personality disorder, even to the point where we see that one of the mental health clinicians who interviewed him said that Jeffrey Dahmer met all of the symptom criteria for borderline personality disorder. Now, that seems to be a little bit of a stretch. We do see evidence that he could have met the frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, the chronic feeling of emptiness, the anger. But when we get to other symptom criteria, it seems more unclear, like affective instability. He had low neuroticism. His mood actually seemed fairly stable. And we see impulsivity referred to a lot here, but the impulsivity with borderline is impulsivity in two areas that would be self-damaging. So he was impulsive, yes, but maybe not in a way we typically see with borderline. But again, he was diagnosed with this, and there was some level of agreement in terms of borderline personality disorder. Now, we also see this discussion around obsessive compulsive personality disorder traits, so not meeting the full criteria for OCPD, but having the traits. And this was probably due to the methodical way he dismembered the bodies and disposed of them. This is evidence of being organized, but not strong evidence of OCPD. This disorder has perfectionism, rigid thinking, following the rules, essentially extremely high conscientiousness.
Going back to what I was saying about his lack of psychoses during his actions, it was too organized. It was too systematic. When a person is psychotic, they're not organized.
And he did not appear to have high conscientiousness. Now, when you get to the argument for OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, this one is a real possibility. He talked about feelings of compulsions, feeling pushed to commit the crimes. Now, usually OCD isn't associated with any violence, and these compulsions could be explained by psychosis, and I think that's a real possibility. So it gets a little confusing as we enter the area of OCD and looking over at psychosis as well, because again, both could explain what he was talking about. So we see that he was diagnosed by at least one of the professionals with psychotic disorder. Now, technically, that diagnosis these days would be called brief psychotic disorder. And the diagnosis is sometimes given when mental health clinicians can't figure out what the real diagnosis is, like after a first episode of psychosis, when it isn't known whether or not somebody will develop schizophrenia. And there's another important part to brief psychotic disorder, and that is that after a psychotic episode, somebody returns to premorbid functioning. So they go back to not having symptoms of psychosis. Now, this is actually a possibility. It explains perhaps why Jeffrey Dahmer was able to function normally, but then would commit these heinous murders. So the next disorder we see that was kind of thrown into this mix is schizotypal personality disorder. This is a cluster A personality disorder in the same cluster as paranoid and schizoid personality disorders, the odd eccentric cluster. And I think this is really one of the most interesting disorders that was mentioned in this case. It's a diagnosis not typically associated with any type of violence, but we do see some behaviors by Jeffrey Dahmer that could be consistent with this diagnosis. He kept the skulls of his victims and other bones. He also kept the genitals. He ate body parts. He felt a connection to the corpses. He would drill holes in the victims' heads and put in water or an acid solution, hoping that they would turn into zombies. He also arranged the bones and thought of it as kind of a power center, and he believed it could help him be successful in a lot of different areas, including...
Here's the thing, though. I think a lot of the collection of the body parts, I think that had a lot more to do with his antisocial personality. The idea that he will always own these people. They will always be his. I don't think that has much to do with any type of connection. It's about ownership, in my opinion.
Real estate investing. So if we look at the symptom criteria for schizotypal personality disorder, we do see that some of the symptom criteria seem to line up with what we saw with Jeffrey Dahmer. So the symptom criteria include ideas of reference, odd beliefs, unusual perceptual experiences, odd thinking, paranoia, constricted affect, odd appearance, not having many close friends except for maybe a first-degree relative, and having social anxiety. Of course, schizotypal alone doesn't really explain the criminal component, but if we take schizotypal and combine this with antisocial personality disorder, this would be consistent with the behavior we see with Jeffrey Dahmer. Another possibility would be schizophrenia mixed with antisocial personality disorder. As I mentioned, later on in prison, we see these diagnoses of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, what we would now call schizoaffective disorder. It's also possible, but I don't think we see really any clear evidence in his behavior of depression and mania, but perhaps it was more evident in a prison setting. So those are some of my thoughts in terms of the personality and mental health characteristics.
I actually think schizoaffective is a pretty safe bet with him. There was definitely an issue with depression. He drank a lot. He drank an obscene amount. So I actually think that's a pretty good diagnosis. He was very self-deprecating, the passive narcissistic traits. But I really feel like that's a pretty safe bet out of all the diagnoses. So that's Dr. Grande. Definitely subscribe to him. We have different views on a lot of different things. I come from more of a psychosocial approach. And I also have a lot more, I think I have more information about the crime. I think he was looking specifically from the clinical aspect of things. But yeah, that's Jeffrey Dahmer. So the issue that I have isn't the series. These things happen. The series wasn't that terrible. But there was some lies during that series. And I think the biggest lie was the Tony Hughes story. Now, in the series, Tony Hughes he's deaf. He has a very strong Black family that are very involved with him. They love him deeply. They're very concerned about him moving away because of his deafness. You can see that they love him deeply. It shows that he has a relationship with Jeffrey Dahmer. They meet each other on multiple occasions, and it's like Jeffrey pursued him. This is all fiction, by the way. And they even play this little weird game. And the game, it's a game that Jeffrey made up. And like I said, this is fiction, but they had it in the series. And pretty much how it works is, if you get too close to Jeffrey's piece on the board, which, by the way, was a bone, you get knocked into the vortex. And Tony Hughes' character says, why? Well, it's sign language. He said, because those are the rules. Basically, they're trying to show that they're trying to get people to empathize with Jeffrey Dahmer. The truth is, Tony Hughes met Jeffrey Dahmer and was killed on the same night that he met Jeffrey Dahmer. There was no relationship. He was a victim just like all the rest of them. And in fact, the Laotian boy that ultimately escaped but was brought back to Jeffrey Dahmer was greeted by Tony Hughes' body that was rotting in the bedroom. So that's what happened to Tony Hughes. And I felt like it was very disrespectful for them to tell this story about Jeffrey Dahmer and this relationship. I just felt like it was so disrespectful. And I don't think enough people are paying attention to that side of the story. They're more upset that the whole thing is being shown on Netflix. I'm more upset about lies, because these type of things, these distortions of the truth, they got niggas on the internet shipping Jeffrey Dahmer and Tony Hughes. Like, literally, people are fucking sick. And we're going to get into some of the outcry on the internet, I guess, regarding this documentary. Correction, Netflix series. This is not a documentary. So hold on one second. I do want to play one last thing, and then we're going to bring Lashid on. This gentleman actually escaped Jeffrey Dahmer and survived. So he can give you an idea of what it was like being with Jeffrey, what his style was. It's a very harrowing story. And after that, we're going to go to the panel. And then right after the panel, I want to talk about some of the stuff that I saw on Twitter regarding this situation. And we're also going to talk about something that Nyla posted. Nyla says that woman, she's very toxic, but hold on 1 second.
Years ago, a drugged, handcuffed Tracy Edwards escaped the serial killer. Tonight, Edwards is in custody facing possible homicide charges himself.
Then, sir, would you tell us your name and
Tracy.
spell your last name for us?
Tracy Edwards, EDWARDS.
Mr. Edwards, we're going to ask you to speak up very loudly into the microphone. I would like to know in what state do you reside at the present time?
Louisiana,
And how old are you, sir?
32.
32, and you are single?
Yes.
And you were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on July the 22nd, 1991?
Yes.
And at or about that time, on that late afternoon, did you have occasion to see a person that you knew at that time or subsequently learned was a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes.
And you know that Mr. Dahmer you're speaking about is a defendant in this case to my right, correct?
Yes.
And that made a record that I can show the identification.
Yeah, Toya, early yesterday morning, police arrested Edwards and another homeless man. They were fighting with a third man named Johnny Jordan when Jordan fell into the river and died. Now, in the 20 years since Edwards led police to Jeffrey Dahmer, he has been in and out of jail. Friends say he struggled with drugs and alcohol and a legacy of being the one who got away.
Sir, would you indicate where Mr. Dahmer is seated in the courtroom?
It's over there.
Right in the middle between my two associates?
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
The record should reflect the defendant's been identified.
Now, Mr. Edwards, you and I met for the first time last evening,
Yes.
and you came up from Louisiana at my request with your attorney,
Right. That's
Mr.
correct.
Saeed, Syed Salet, Salet.
That's correct.
And you came up here to testify to the events, as you recall them, that occurred on the late afternoon, early evening, early morning hours of July the 22nd and the morning of July the 23rd, 1991.
That's correct.
So that you know, Mr. Edwards, your name is known to the jury because there has been testimony concerning what happened to you and at the apartment of Mr. Dahmer. Do you understand?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Where did you know Mr. Dahmer by name prior to that date?
I've seen him a couple of times before then. I didn't know his name personally.
All right. Did you ever talk to him before that date?
I was speaking to him, saying hello as he passed by.
Just casual, friendly.
Casual, yeah, friendly.
hellos.
Hellos, yeah.
Pause. I mean, here's one of the things that I always found interesting. I'm hearing different opinions about Jeffrey Dahmer and how the community accepted him. Some people describe him as a weirdo. Some people describe him as being, I don't know, almost like a person who's been embraced. So it's interesting. You're hearing all these different opinions.
Where was it that you saw him in the late afternoon, early morning hours of July the 22nd?
Grand Avenue Mall.
And that was in Milwaukee,
Correct.
downtown on Wisconsin Avenue.
Wisconsin, correct.
Were you with somebody or were you alone?
A couple of our friends, yeah.
Okay, so the record is absolutely clear. You are not a homosexual, are you?
No, not at all.
So you were with a couple of your buddies, were you?
That's correct.
And what were you doing?
We was drinking beer, just talking, hanging out, you know.
About 6 o'clock at night, was this?
Yeah, about 6:15.
Did you have occasion then to see Mr. Dahmer?
Yeah, he approached us eventually and started talking to us.
Were you three black males?
Yeah, one white, two black male.
So you were friends.
Yeah, my best friend was white. Yeah.
When he came up and started talking to you, what is it that Mr. Dahmer said to you?
He said he was just in the city from Chicago. He was taking care of her sick grandmother, I believe, in West Allis.
Did he have any further conversation with you and your friend?
Yeah, he was just talking. He said he was a professional photographer. He usually pays people for pictures and stuff like that if anybody was interested in making money at that time.
To have to pose for pictures?
Yeah.
Did he describe the kind of pictures that you were going to be posing for if you chose to take him up on the offer?
He said nude.
Nude.
Right.
Now, after he said that to you, what did you and your friends do?
Pause. I want to definitely acknowledge Lashee for you entering the panel. But before we really get to a panel, I just wanted to pause this for a second. This is the early 90s when this whole trial this trial took place. So this was an era of closeting. I don't buy it. I think he knew what kind of situation Jeffrey Dahmer was trying to set up. Definitely not the cannibal part, but definitely there was some idea that there was going to be some type of sexual exchange. Now, I know people may disagree with me, but that's what I think happened. And ain't no way you thought this nigga was some important photographer going to his apartment that smelled like shit. Like, I don't buy that, but let's continue.
They were just talking, discussing it, seeing what was going on. Yeah.
And what did you end up doing? Did you remain at Grand Avenue or did you go somewhere else?
We proceeded from there. He said he was going to buy all his guys beer, rum, and coke, watch videos or something like that.
Rum and coke, did you say?
Yeah, we went to the liquor store on Wisconsin Avenue, 7th and Wisconsin Avenue.
So you walked from Grand Avenue down to 7th and Wisconsin?
Yeah, up, so to speak. Yeah,
at that
between
time,
5th and 6th, 7th, something like that.
Okay.
I'm not really sure.
The general area of 6th
Right.
or 7th in Wisconsin. Was it going to be the three of you and Mr. Dahmer were going to stay together, or was it agreed upon that one or others of you were going to go with Mr. Dahmer, or was there no agreement?
They were going to meet up with us eventually later on that evening.
Meet up with who?
Jeffrey at his apartment, but he gave them the wrong address at that time.
Okay, so did the three of you and your two friends and Mr. Dahmer, walk down to a liquor store, and what happened when you got to the...
I want to point out something. Going back to my initial analysis, Jeffrey Dahmer is planning this from top to bottom. He's giving people the wrong addresses. He's trying to isolate him. This ain't no fucking psychosis. He's not confused. He knows exactly what he's doing.
The liquor store.
I saw my brother. We started talking. At this time, Jeff was talking to my other friends.
So you say you saw your brother. He wasn't one of the three that you were with.
No,
then?
no.
You saw him on the street?
Yeah.
Okay, so you had conversation.
Right.
Okay, did anyone go into a liquor store and buy anything?
Mr. Dahmer brought liquor. Yeah.
So he went into a liquor store?
Right.
And when he came out, who was still there?
Okay. When he came out, we were all still there.
And then what happened? Tell us what happened then.
Okay. He was talking to them. Then we were going to go up the street. I was going to go home and change and everything at this time. So we proceeded. We caught a cab at the bus station,
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what was your plan as you were in front of that liquor store after Mr. Dahmer came out with the liquor and you had been talking to your brother? What was your plan? What were you going to do? You say you were going to go home and change clothes?
Yeah, and eventually I was going to go over there, and maybe check out what he was talking about making the money at that time.
So your interest was in making some money?
Right.
Did he tell you how much you would be paid if you did pose for him?
He said $100 for
You had no idea, did you, that this was for any homosexual
No,
target?
he didn't come across like that, and he didn't even act like it at that time.
Always the most responsible, always on time.
In 2004, Emily
It's clearly, it was clearly a situation where it was like,
Yeah, I just want to say, I believe him. I believe him. I mean, I believe that, yeah, because who's the other guy? Oliver Lacey. Yeah, I believe that was his name. It's been years. Understand, y'all, that my family lived 2 blocks away. I was like 17 going on 18 at the time. My family lived 2 blocks away from where the murders occurred. We were on 24th and Wales. Jeffrey Dahmer was like on 24th and Kilburn between State and Kilburn. It was just 2 blocks away. My niece revealed that, I was in a girls' home at the time. My niece revealed that they saw when the freezers, as my niece put it, was carried out. But yeah, because he supposedly, now my uncle, just for the knowing, my uncle worked with Jeffrey Dahmer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory on the south side of Milwaukee. My uncle said that he was just, this uncle passed away, however. He said that he was reserved. He just said he just kind of kept to himself. But yeah, I believe that, because you do have those, and you got to know back then, like $50, $100, ain't that long ago, but that's the, it's just, you don't think that things, I'm not saying that I would do that, but, even if they were new picks, they thinking about making some fast cash. Some, like the one female, she says she don't know who was supposed to be making, what was it, Errol Lindsay, the one girl's brother, the sister to, that was shouting in court. she's like, she still don't figure out how he got mixed up with him. She's swearing that he was heterosexual, but you know, he had this, it's said that he had this, like, he could have this professional like demeanor. Well, they're thinking, like in the case of Oliver Lacey, okay, I'm gonna make who he met at the Grand Avenue Mall, downtown Milwaukee. Well, I'm gonna make me a quick $100, $200, whatever he was offering. You know, there are those. I know we say that, you know, looking at it, like it's easy to say, well, you know, yeah, but actually, I believe him. Now, yeah, he may have knew that, you know, this dude was like wanted some freaky pictures, but just probably thinking, you know, some quick money. Oh well, whatever, you know. But it's just because it was a shock, especially in that area, like that
I
happening.
think Abby brings up a good point, and this is what I actually think is the truth. Also, he was a white boy, and I feel as though when
Yeah.
white people talk to certain black people, they give them a level of respect off rip. We're talking about
Right.
an uneducated, socially awkward white man who lived in the same, you know, neighborhood as all the other black people, whether it was a, you know, middle class, working class neighborhood, he was in the same neighborhood. So they gave him respect that wasn't really warranted, respect that he probably wouldn't get in his own community. However, I don't buy this whole situation about, you know, some random white man asks you for some nude pictures. Nigga, you ain't no professional model. Like, this is not like, this isn't like he was an actor or something and he came across this photographer. And even in those scenarios, it's a little sketchy. I honestly think he is one of those situations from the 90s where people were still in a closet and they understood what it meant to come out. And he probably would have stayed in the closet his whole life and never talked about it had he not been associated with a very famous homosexual cannibal, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. He definitely continued his life of crime. But I don't want to focus so much on that. I think honestly that was a trauma response to surviving a fucking situation like that. But let's get back into
but you know, it's like what Abby is saying. And remember what I was saying earlier in my stream about Milwaukee and I'm not trying to put down black people from Milwaukee. I'm not trying to, but if you can recall what I was saying earlier about Milwaukee and them being comfortable, if you understand what I'm saying, and what she's saying, you know, him being white, them trusting him. What I'm saying also, he was said, you know, I guess because believe it or not, there were people who found him. Now, I didn't hear any black people saying this at the time. Now, supposedly, there are black people. There were people who found him attractive, and they would have him. This was something that people had issue with him coming in. They would show him like coming in the courtroom or coming when he was arrested, all clean shaven, you know, with the haircut and all of that, as if they're trying to make him look appealing. And they probably seen, now, if I believe that, let's say if he looked like, let's say the serial killer John Wayne Gacy, let's say if he was fat, sloppy, you know, people do respond differently. Now, let's say if they seen him as attractive, he's white, attractive, you know what I'm saying? People do respond differently based on whether or not they see you as attractive. You know what I mean?
that is true. There's been studies to prove that they'll have two different teachers, both giving the same lesson, but the more attractive teacher naturally gets the higher marks because that's just how the brain works. So there is a lot of truth to that. I definitely want to get back into the testimony because I feel like he tells the story of kind of what it was like. And Lashid, me and you will tag team and kind of break down what we're hearing.
John hired Tracy Edwards as head cook to feed the homeless at the Cathedral of St. John. She later learned he had never had counseling after his run-in with Jeffrey Dahmer.
It did stun me, which is why I hauled him over to the Red Cross immediately. The nurse said, okay, you can come back, you can come for free. You can come back to therapy, we'll see you in a week. He never came back.
John believes Edwards found relief in drugs and alcohol, which resulted in repeated arrests in the last 20 years.
So now your friends are still there, and you're going to go home and you order a cab for the over at the bus depot. What happens? Tell us what happened.
Okay. And then me and Dahmer, my friends say they're going to go and change and call up the girls and we'll meet up later on, you know. Yeah.
Was there an address given as to where you were going?
He gave them some address that wasn't correct. You know,
You later found that out?
right from my friends.
What happened then? Who else remained there when this was all transpired? Just you and Mr. Dahmer, or you, Mr. Dahmer, and others?
After it all had transpired, it was me and Mr. Dahmer in the cab, you know, leaving.
You met up at about 5:45, 6 o'clock, 6:15. What time is it now at this time?
It's maybe 6:30 as we get to 26th in Wisconsin.
So you stop at 26th in Wisconsin, and what happens there?
Okay, we get out the cab then, and then he suggested he go to the store and get cigarettes before he went to his apartment.
And after he did that, did you go to his apartment?
Yeah,
What route?
through the alleys, through the back way. We
Was
ended
there,
up
any,
back.
was there any discussion as to why you were taking that route?
Said it was safer, people wouldn't bother us or whatever.
At the time that you were walking with him towards his apartment, what was your plans on doing when you got to the apartment?
Really drinking the beer, I wasn't really sure if I was going to pose or not, you know. Yep, I wasn't really sure at that point.
You at least were contemplating maybe you would.
Well, yeah, I was going to make up my mind once I got there, whatever. You know.
Were you in need of money?
Yeah, I just started working and the offer sounded good at that time.
Okay. Now, when you got to his apartment, how was he acting? Tell us about his. Tell me about his demeanor. You know what I mean by that, Mr. Edwards?
Yes,
How
I
was he
understand.
acting?
Just like a normal, everyday person, you know, friendly, good conversationalist. He was talking about the military, things of that nature. Yeah.
Had you been in the military?
My father retired in the Air Force, so I've been to several different bases. I was born on an Air Force Army base in Fort Carson.
And that's the kind of thing you were
Yeah,
talking to him
it's
about.
like a family thing, you know, so I know a lot about it.
Had he been drinking alcohol?
Yeah, I consumed some. He was drinking beer at the time. when I first
Well,
met
the
him.
time that you were like going to his apartment, was he intoxicated?
No.
Had he been drinking?
Yeah, I've been drinking a couple of beers.
How about you? Were you intoxicated?
No, not at all.
Had you had something to drink?
I sipped maybe a little beer, my friend's beer, that was it.
All right, now you get to the apartment. You go in the back way.
Yes, correct.
You went up to the apartment. Tell us what happens when you get up to the apartment. Tell us what you observed, what your senses told you.
Okay, first of all, it seemed like a normal apartment. When we got inside, he turned out burglar alarms. I asked him why. First, it was a foul odor, okay?
Tell us about that. What kind of an
It
odor?
was just like an odor. I didn't quite know what it was. You know, he told me a sewer pipe had broke and management would take care of it. You know?
And
I feel like that would have been my first red flag. Honestly, there was plenty of red flags, but the thing that really would have thrown me off, even if you would have assumed like he was a real photographer, was just the way that the place smelled. Not only did you have rotting bodies, you had chemicals breaking down bodies. It was apparently an awful smell. Lashid, since you were in the neighborhood, do you remember anybody talking about that apartment or the smell, or was it far enough away from you that you didn't really communicate with any of the people over there?
Okay, sorry about that. Now at that time I happened to be in the girls' home because I was run away and my family was because Milwaukee was a kind of smelly city because of the brewery, but well, what I had heard was more from the neighbors afterward, people afterward. The talk of how they had been complaining about the building. Now we were 2 blocks away, so we didn't exactly smell what they were talking about, in the building. Even though Milwaukee was kind of a smelly city, you could smell the like fermentation. It's almost like you got used to the smell because of the breweries that were nearby, and so you kind of got used to that smell. But yeah, I can imagine because ironically, Jeffrey Dahmer had lived in a building that we were in, and he could have been there at the time before he moved to the Oxford Apartments. It was a building on 24th Street in Michigan, and I remember it was a dead body. I talked about this earlier. It was a dead body. The police was investigating. They don't know what happened, but it was like a dead body. I don't know if it was dismembered or what, but it was the most disgusting smell. It filled up the whole building. So I can't, that's the thing. That's a hella red flag because I had never smelled anything like that. It smelled worse than shit. It smelled worse than anything I had smelled. So I don't understand how that could have been. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how well he disposed of the body. of the smell. I don't know if it was a thing that was like lingering or if it was a smell that would come back. But definitely, you know, after everything broke out, you know, and people in the neighborhood, people in that building was talking about it. But now I can't say that I noticed anything like that. But yeah, if it was like that smell that happened to be in the building that we were in on Michigan when a dead body was found, that was my only time, you know, smelling anything like that. There's no way, because it was like it like the smell of a corpse is worse. A dead corpse has been dead. I don't know how long that person in the apartment that was found dead, but it's like if you've ever had like rotting chicken, it's a very horrific smell. That right there. So if that what they were smelling, obviously that's what they were smelling. That would have been, I don't even understand how he was able to get away with that. But you know what I'm saying? That's why it's so much that's questionable. That's what I'm saying.
Also, not only the rotting smell of flesh or rotting meat that's already a bad thing, but human rotting flesh, there's something in us that we can recognize we can recognize that, oh, this is a body. And because there's something in us that automatically triggers our fear response. So it's one of those things where it's like you're smelling this. And the series did a very good job. And Niecy Nash, she may get an Emmy after this. Niecy did an amazing job where she showed the trauma of what it was like being a neighbor. Because she played his neighbor and she could hear him sawing and drilling and doing all of this crazy shit. And she could smell it. And you can just see the trauma that Niecy did an amazing. Like, I've never seen her in a dramatic role. And she did very, like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's the series. A lot of people are going to be divided about it. A lot of people won't watch it. But I think,
I'm not checking it out. I can't watch that.
And I can understand why. What I can say they did a very good job is they did not make it gory. I don't feel like they exploited the gore side of things. So that I appreciated, because I don't like all that gore stuff. But let's get back to this testimony. And then honestly, I want to get a good understanding of this whole MK Ultra approach, because I don't know a lot about that argument. I know a little bit about MK Ultra, but I don't know the story regarding Dahmer, MK Ultra, his time in the military. I want to connect all those themes together.
Did you accept that?
Yes, because I worked around at construction companies before, and when pipes bust, sewer pipes bust, they smell. You know?
Okay.
So I brought that.
So you say your first thing you did was notice the odor. He opened the door to the apartment?
Yes.
And you walked in?
Yes.
He turned off something. What did he turn off?
Alarms.
Did you ask him about that?
Yeah. And he said the part of the neighborhood he was in, he was protecting his property, things like that, cameras, VCRs, TVs, things of that nature.
Did you accept that?
Yes, I did.
After getting in the apartment, can you generally describe the apartment, both the apartment that you saw then and the apartment that you saw, the other parts of the apartment you saw? Tell the jury what the apartment was like.
It was like normal, pretty decent apartment, had nice things in it. You know, it had certain boxes sitting on the front, neurotic acid boxes. I asked him about it. He said he cleaned bricks with those, you know, which you can use that type of acid to clean bricks. So I brought that also. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you just said. You asked him about some boxes? Yeah, that were laying in the front living room floor. And what did he tell you about those? That he cleaned brick with the neurotic acid. Okay. Now, was the apartment small, large, medium? Give us a size. Kind of medium size. Yeah. Right. Now, when you went in there, you went in, as you entered, were you in the living room? Yes. And what was the living room? What did you see in there? The boxes you told us about? The boxes, there's a couch. There's a fish tank there also. A black lamp. Yeah, there was a little table-like on the left side. Could you see a refrigerator? Yeah, I could see the refrigerator on my left. Was it close to the living room? Yeah, maybe 8 feet from the living room. So it was just off the living room? Right. Now, did you stay in that room or did you go to another room right away? We stayed in that room for a while. And where did you sit, if you did? Okay, at the end of the sofa, like I am now. This is a sofa. I was at this end, and he was at this side. Referring to the jury, I mean, the witness box, if that were a sofa, he would be at that end. That is the end where he's seated on the witness stand, which would be the part closest to the judge. Is that right?
Tracy Edwards and another man, Timothy Carr, are charged with recklessly endangering safety. Edwards' attorney asked that his client not have to appear in intake court today to avoid being shown on camera, but the court denied that request. A witness told police on Tuesday night, Edwards and Carr threw a third man into the river in downtown Milwaukee. That man, named Johnny Jordan, drowned. During the short court proceeding today, Edwards listened to the charge against him and spoke only to tell the judge he understood what was happening.
You understand you've been charged with recklessly endangering safety, first-degree party to a crime, and upon conviction of this offense, which is a Class F felony, you may be fined not more than $25,000 and imprisoned not more than 12 years and 6 months or both. Do you understand that charge and those penalties, sir?
Yes, sir.
Where did Mr. Dahmer, what did he do?
He sat like here, maybe a couple feet from me.
Not
my
close
left.
to you.
Maybe 2 feet.
You in fear of anything at that time?
Not at all.
Okay, and what did the two of you do?
Okay, he said we were still talking, chatting. You know, he asked me, was I interested in doing the photography? You know, I told him I was still contemplating, so therefore he offered me a beer and a rum and Coke mixture at that point.
Now, you're fully clothed,
Yes.
okay, and you're sitting on a couch.
Right.
And he talks to you about these.
I just want to briefly add something. You're in this shitty, dirty, nasty apartment where bodies are rotting, and you are accepting a drink from it. Like, I feel like there's so many things that would have made me go, yeah, nah, this isn't going to work for me. But just something that I just wanted to add in there because I don't know.
No, understand he didn't see the evidence, because if you look at the photos taken from the apartment after they, you know, he didn't see the evidence as of yet. Those were some pretty decent apartments, you know, and Jeffrey Dahmer had the artwork and all of that. The only thing I guess that would have been suspicious was the odor and all of the locks.
Apparently, though, towards the end, right before he got caught, he started to get very sloppy. And that's one of the reasons why this guy managed to get out in the first place. So when the police came back to the apartment, when the guy flagged down the police, they were able to find Polaroids, lots of evidence around that can kind of tie everything together. So yeah, there wasn't like a corpse in the living room, but there was a lot of other stuff that was around.
Yeah. When they, but did you ever listen to with him talking? Well, he may talk about it, and it's been a while since I've listened. Oh, okay.
So hold on, he's definitely going to get onto that.
This posing, you weren't sure you're going to do it.
Right.
How much had you been offered to do the posing?
$100.
Okay. And when he brings you the beer, he brings you rum and Coke?
Yeah, he brings the beer first, and then he brings the rum and Coke.
How big of a glass?
Maybe that big.
About 4 inches high?
4 inches, yeah, 3.5, something like that.
Did you ever taste it?
Yeah, I took a few sips.
Was it strong, weak, medium, or just about right?
I'm not a big liquor drinker, so it didn't taste that good to me.
Didn't taste good to you. You don't know if it was strong or not.
It's strong or not, no, because I'm.
What did Mr. Dahmer do? Did he likewise have a drink?
I think, yeah, right, a beer, but I don't think he drank all of his drink at that time.
Did he have any rum with him?
I just noticed the beer, right?
What time are we talking about now that you're sitting on the couch and you get the beer? You got over there about what time and how long after this?
It was about before 7, 6:45, something like that.
So you're sitting on the couch, he brings you a beer and rum and Coke, what happens?
Okay, then we just study talking and everything, you know.
General talk?
General talk.
What happens?
Yeah, then I was just, I don't know, getting a little agitated maybe, you know, because of the smell and things. And then he threw my conversation off talking about the fish in the fish tank, you know.
Okay, when you start talking about the fish in the fish tank, do you bring that up or does he?
He does.
And what do you do when he does that?
I turn to the right, like the fish tank is here. I'm turning all the way over here.
You turn to your right to look at it?
To look at the fish tank, right.
And when that happens, what happens to you?
All of a sudden, a handcuff and a knife is pulled on me. Yeah.
Handcuff is placed on your body? Where?
On my left wrist.
And you see a knife?
Yeah, the knife, yeah.
Now, at that moment, what do you do?
First, I feel fear. Then I ask him, what's going on? You know, this is not necessary, you know, to pull a knife on me.
Are you afraid?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to know why he did that?
None whatsoever.
Did you have any idea at that time it was going to happen?
No.
Tell me about his demeanor at that time when you looked and realized he had a knife and you in a cuff. You were only cuffed on one wrist.
One wrist, yeah.
What was happening to the other part of the handcuff?
Okay, he had it in his hand.
He was holding it?
Holding that in the wrist, yeah.
Where was the knife? In the other hand?
The knife was like he had here. The knife was in his hand. He had it on me like this.
Let the record reflect he was holding the knife in his right hand as he showed it, holding the cuff in his left hand. Is that right?
Right.
And your left hand is cuffed?
Yeah, right.
Where do you have the knife? What kind of a knife was it?
It was like a military knife, a machete of some type. He had it lowered right up under my rib cage.
So he had
it somewhere in the back here.
He had it pointed at your rib cage.
Yeah.
Did you feel it? Touch
it?
Yeah,
he had it on me. He had it against my body.
What happened? What was going through your mind the moment that happened when you realized you had a knife at your side and a handcuff on your hand? What did you think?
I think like, what's going on, This guy's so nice, and all of a sudden, it's like he's pulling knives and handcuffs and all on me,
What'd you do? What'd you say to him?
I asked him what the problem was, that it's not necessary to do this,
What'd he say?
He told me at that point if I wouldn't do what he said, he would kill me. Yeah.
Now, tell us about his demeanor at the time that you look at him and you say, what's going on? You don't have to do this. What happens to Mr. Dahmer? What's he like?
It's like not the same person that we met at Grand Avenue Mall.
How does he different?
His face structure seemed different. His body structure, it's like it wasn't him anymore. It's like it was a totally different guy here.
So he told you if you didn't do what he told you to do, he'd hurt you.
It hurt me.
What'd you do? What happened? Tell us what happened step by step as best you can
And
remember.
then all of a sudden he kind of calms down, and then he said he has a key in the bedroom. So we proceed to the bedroom.
The key to the handcuffs.
Right.
So you believed he was going to take him off?
Yeah. At that point, I had to go along with this guy, and then if I had to find out, so I walked back there with him. He kind of guides me back there.
Guides you back with the cuff and the knife?
Yeah. Right.
And you go into the bedroom.
Right.
What do you see in the bedroom?
A big, about 50, 60 gallon drum barrel, whatever.
Do you ever see a 50, 60 drum barrel in anybody's bedroom
No.
before?
Not at all.
Do you have any idea? You ask him what it was?
No. At that point, I asked no questions at that time.
Was there a bed in that room?
Yes.
How was the bed? Was it made, unmade? What did
It
what
was,
op-
it was unmade.
what did you see on the bed, if anything?
Something like a stain of whatever.
What did you think it was?
At that point in time, I wasn't sure.
What did you do when you got in the bedroom as he's holding onto the cuff and the knife? What did you do?
Studied us talking, trying to be friends with him.
Did you remain standing? Did you sit down?
He made me sit down at that point. We both sit on the bed.
Was it at the foot of the bed, side of the bed, head of the bed?
Maybe halfway between.
Did that room have a TV set in it?
Yes.
Was there anything going on the TV?
Yeah, the Exorcist movies was playing at that time.
There was an Exorcist movie on. You know which one of them?
The name, I'm not sure. I think it's 3. I'm not sure which one.
So there was a movie. Did you know it to be part of television or VCR?
VCR, normally that's not on regular television, so I thought it was VCR.
You knew there was a movie show.
Right.
Did you see him put it on or was it on?
No. When we first got into the apartment, he went through the back to the back bedroom. Maybe he put it on then. I'm not sure.
Okay. And then what happened? You're both sitting on the bed?
Yes.
Are you still in handcuffs?
Yes.
Is he holding the handcuff?
Right.
You still have the knife?
Right.
Is it pointed at your side as you've told us before?
Right.
You trying to be cool?
Very much so.
You're not fighting with him?
No.
What's your intention? What are you planning on doing?
Getting away. I was contemplating on at the point, jumping out the window. I was basically talking with this person, trying to let him know I was his friend.
As you were sitting there on the bed, when he had you by the handcuff and a knife at your side, at that time, which would have been maybe 7 o'clock,
something like that.
What impression was made upon your mind by the conduct, action, manner, expression, and conversation that you observed of Mr. Dahmer?
His frame of mind is what you want to know, right? Okay, he acted. At times, he would go through like different changes with me,
Tell us about that.
1 minute, he's like nice. Then he was telling he didn't want people to leave him or abandon him, things of this nature, Yeah.
Well, what did you think about him as a person? What impression was made on your mind of this fellow that you're dealing with here?
Yeah, that at times he wasn't himself, and then at times he was like a nice guy, He would come and go different times, throughout the whole time. Then he would like sit, being quiet at times, watching a movie, wanting me to watch the movie, just doing little tanning sounds,
Did you observe him watching the movie and how he would react to the movie?
Right, he would like to start rocking back and forth, certain parts of the movie or whatever.
You have to say, what did he say, man?
He was like chanting in certain times and rocking back and forth.
Tell us about his chanting. What was that all about?
I'm not even sure, sir, but it was just like, I can't tell you the words. I couldn't understand what he was saying at that time.
Can you mimic him? How it sounded?
It's like a slow slur, like some of that nature, some close like that. I'm not sure.
Did it keep on for a period of time?
Off and on throughout the ordeal.
And how about the movement back and forth? How was that being effectuated?
Just like back and forth, he would do it every now and then.
Just as you are rocking in your chair.
Like this.
And chanting.
And chanting.
Was there any parts of the movie that was going on that you saw that he said anything about?
It was like the part about the preacher that used to be a preacher that had got possessed. That it would seem like he was like interested in that part. That part had his attention more than anything.
Well, tell us about what you mean by that. What impressions were made upon your mind when this was going on as to had his attention? How did he appear to you?
It appeared like it was like he wanted to mimic it or he liked that part, you know, being demonized or whatever in that nature.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah, like he wanted that type of movie, that part, certain parts of that part interested him. You know, it was like he changed with it at times. Then he would get more aggressive, try to get me to handcuff myself, both hands. He's told me it made him feel more dominant.
Okay, did you and he move off of the bed at any time?
Yes, he wanted me to lay flat down, stomach down on the floor at that time.
Did you at any time go to the bathroom, use the washroom prior to the time that he asked you to lay down on the floor?
No.
All right, tell us what happened how did that happen that he told you to lay down on the floor?
No, he told me to lay down face down, put both of my hands behind my back because he changed again at that point, like he got more aggressive at that time.
Okay, now, but tell us, did he still have the knife out?
Yes, he still had the knife.
And what did you do?
Okay, I kind of like laid on my sides for some reason. I guess God told me not to lay flat down or let this person handcuff me, so I didn't.
So you were trying to stop that from happening, but you got down on the floor.
Right.
What did he do?
He kind of laid across me, put his head across my chest at that point.
What was he doing with his head?
Pardon me?
What did it appear to you he was doing with his head? What was he trying to do?
Like he was listening to my heart, because at the point he told me he was going to eat my heart.
Said he was going to eat your heart?
Yes, that's correct.
Did he still have the knife? Where was the knife pointed?
When I was on the floor, he had it pointed at my groin area at that time.
One knife?
He had several, and then he slipped when I managed to slide one underneath the bed. And I guess during a point of time through an ordeal, he didn't know where the knife was, so I didn't know if he felt that was a threat or not.
So he still had a knife, you're on the floor. How long does he lay on top of you trying to hear your heart as you've described it?
Maybe a minute and a half.
And then what did you do then?
I knew something was about to happen, so I suggested that I go to the bathroom. I had to use the bathroom.
And what did he do?
He kind of guided me to the bathroom.
So when you say he guided, you still had hold of your handcuff?
Yes.
And you went to the bathroom?
Right.
Did you urinate?
Yeah.
Were you able to utilize your own zipper, or did he touch you at all?
Touched me in no way. Didn't attempt to look. He just held me in back. You know.
So in other words, he didn't try to look at what your penis looked like or anything?
Not at all.
So after urinating, did you think that you were going to be the victim of, did he ask to engage in any homosexual acts with you?
None whatsoever.
Okay, so now you leave the bathroom and what happens?
Okay, then we go back into the bedroom. It was like different time spans. We were talking about him losing his job. Then he would come to the person that I was first with, you know, and then at certain points he would change. You know, at first he was telling me about how people didn't care for him and things of this nature. And I was trying to comfort him, letting him know that I was a friend, you know, that I wasn't going to try to run away from him or nothing like that.
You were being cool.
I guess God, you can say that because I had no control. It was just.
Did this continue on for a long period of time during the night?
Yes, apparently so. Time seemed to, I don't know. But I stayed in there that long, so it had to be going on throughout the whole ordeal, which it was. So time just happened like that.
And all this time you're trying to hold him down?
Yeah, certain points, right.
How often would he go in and out of these moods?
Sir, the time spans I couldn't really tell you, but like he would I guess if you want to put it together in time, every 30 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that, you know, and then he would have moods of being just silent, you know, and I wouldn't say anything, try to provoke him or say the wrong thing. I would be silent with him.
So you just let him be alone. Was that movie on the whole time, a long time?
It was on a pretty good period of time. Yeah. When it went off, I couldn't tell you.
Did he continue to chant from time to time?
Yes, it happened several times throughout the ordeal.
Now, when he would watch the movie, did you notice when he would go into this thing that you told us where he would really become fixed on the movie screen? What was happening? How often would that happen?
Throughout the movie, maybe every 15 or 20 minutes, and then he would turn around and try to ask me to put both of my hands behind my back, and I wouldn't, you know, do it. I would talk to him. I tell him, you can trust me, you know, you don't have to do this, and that would calm him down a little bit.
He had the knife the whole time.
Right.
He's watching the movie and he becomes very interested in the movie.
Right.
You don't do anything. Just sit there.
Just sit there and be quiet.
And then he would start conversation with you again.
Yeah, he would like you're gonna have to do this and that, you know. Then he told me at a point I was gonna have to kill him, or he was gonna have to kill me at one point.
Were you and he drinking during this time?
No.
So he wasn't running out, bringing you out and getting beers and coming back?
I would have been out the window at that point.
Sure.
He would have.
Did he, when he was fixed, I'm trying to get some words to understand, was he intoxicated?
He had been drinking, but as far as being intoxicated, he was not staggering or anything of that nature.
But you know that some people, when they have too much to drink, change their moods. Was that the kind of mood changes he was having, or a different kind of mood change?
I think this was like more of an inner mood change than an alcoholic mood change.
What kind of mood?
It's like
inner mood?
Yeah, person change, not alcohol change.
What did you think about this guy? What was going through your mind as to who you were sitting next to, who was doing all these things?
a bizarre individual, someone that was very confused at this time.
Now, there came a time when you went to the washroom again.
Right. I suggested, yeah, because he had started getting aggressive a little bit again. I suggested go to the bathroom. He let me stay in there by myself while he stayed outside the door at that time.
And what happened then?
And then I told him, well, I was contemplating, I was asking God, shall I make my move now? And I was going to just jump out the window.
I do wanted to point out a few things. He is really smart. He was really good at de-escalating Jeffrey. He was really good at getting him to move around. Every time he tried to get him to handcuff himself, he's like, no, he found ways to move around that situation. That takes not only, I don't know if it's a skill. I don't know what happened to him as a child. Maybe he experienced some type of abuse. So he's already used to dealing with crazy people. So he was very well equipped with dealing with this situation. So it's just wow hearing this story. Lashid, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, man, I feel so bad for him. But yeah, you'd be surprised when you're in a situation. I know, like I just mentioned in the chat room, I was, I've talked about this in the past. At knife point, I was raped, but what I had to do, which is, to keep me from thinking about what was happening, and what could be happening, I just kept doing what I do, running my mouth, trying to talk, getting the person's conscious, and imagine the person telling you that they may kill you and all of that. I don't really want to go too much into it, but yeah, it just all that I just kept on talking and talking calmly. Cause it's like, I don't know, it's like some people, they get off on you begging or screaming or crying, or where in my case, it sounds like he was doing what I was doing, just talking calmly, trying to talk as if you're like a friend, as if you're trying to counsel them. You know what I'm saying? Like in my situation initially, I wasn't like begging or screaming or anything. I just kept trying to talk calmly to the person. And also I was, it was like I had to step out of my body. Like, is this about to happen to me? Am I about to, be raped and killed? So I had to like step. It was like not me, it's like kind of like I stepped out of my body. So I was just trying to talk to the person, and reason with them, and without panicking. It's like I was in an out of body experience, because for one, I couldn't believe what was happening. I couldn't believe what may be about what's about to happen to me. So it was like I wasn't even in my own body. But I just I just kept talking. Something bad still happened, me getting raped, but I wasn't killed. I was threatened to be killed. Because I was told I was going to be also killed. So yeah, I mean, I'm just listening to this like, damn, and I feel so bad for this. Yeah, you can go ahead and play. I mean, just mute.
One of the things that, if you've ever worked inside of a psychiatric facility, there's usually some type of de-escalation, crisis intervention, training that they do. And one of the things that you need to be able to do is verbally de-escalate people before you even touch a person. The idea is to call them, to not necessarily speak passively, because that's not going to get the job done, but you can't be hyper aggressive. But he was able to get his point across. You're not going to handcuff both of my arms. So he's being assertive in a way, but not doing it in a way where Jeffrey would get so upset that he would go on the offensive, because clearly Jeffrey ain't afraid to stab somebody. So he was very smart. And
it's like you have to talk like you are the counselor, like you're trying to counsel them, or as
precisely.
Yeah. Because I think like if I would have like even like been in a really panicky scream, and of course that's expected out of fear. But I honestly think that if I would have reacted in that manner, it would have been worse. You know what I mean? Even though it's understood why I would react, screaming or panicking, even though that's understood. But all I was doing is just trying to talk, and, being that with that person who had did that to me, we had like in the past spoken the Bible and stuff. You know what I mean? So I think I was trying to reach their conscious, because Yeah, this is
And
this man.
and sometimes people, especially if they're, antisocial and they get off on terrorizing people, they may
Right.
get off on the idea of
Exactly.
you crying and screaming or you fighting, being super aggressive. But sometimes that neutral middle ground kind of brings them down. It's a way of
Right.
de-escalating them because you're not being super passive, you're not being super aggressive. You're trying to bring them down to that neutral space also. But he's almost
And
done. We're
that's
gonna get
exactly what I'm thinking. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
we're gonna knock this out, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about the MK Ultra side of things. Because, like I mentioned earlier, I don't know much about the story of how that plays a factor in what's going on.
But when I got out, for some reason, I asked, could I have another beer? Yeah.
And what did he do?
And he reaches over, he guides me over and reaches in and get a beer.
He still got you on the cuff.
Yeah. And then he tells me, I told him I want to sit in the front because it's an air conditioner. And I was just going to try to jump out the window or go for the door or whatever. And because the back bedroom didn't have an air conditioner, only in the front. So I suggested we sit on the couch. I had unbuttoned my shirt to try to make it feel more at ease. And then I just sat on the couch and he just started going out of himself again.
Going out of himself?
Yeah, he was like paying me no attention at that time.
Like he wasn't there?
Yeah, he started the chanting again and it's like just sitting there, And then I just, for some reason, I said, well, I need to go to the bathroom again. And he didn't follow me at that point. So I reached up, I got up, then I hit him and I ran out.
So you hit him?
Right.
Did you have any other belongings there?
I have my bag right there at the end of the couch. I sit in exactly the same place I sit when I went in there.
So when you got up, he let go of your cuff to let you go to the bathroom again?
He just let me stay there. I was going to go for the window. At that point, he didn't even have the cuff. It's like I wasn't even there anymore.
And when you saw that, what'd you do?
Mm-hmm. I just seized the opportunity. I said, well, at least I'm going to die trying. I'm not just going to sit here,
What'd you do, son?
I hit him and I ran towards the door and he was right there, tried to grab me, get me back in there.
And what happened?
Then I made it outside.
So he wasn't able to bring you back in?
Bring me back in there, no.
He tried?
He tried.
And as you left that apartment, as you got away from him, I'm going to ask you again, what impressions were made on your mind by the conduct of Jeffrey Dahmer, by the actions of Jeffrey Dahmer, by the manner, expressions, and conversations, Jeffrey Dahmer, that you observed? Can you give us some words?
It's like I told the policeman that this freak, this crazy guy, was trying to hurt me. Yeah.
Did you run out of the building?
Yes, I did.
Did you summon help?
Yes.
Milwaukee Police Department?
That's correct.
Did they come back there with you to the apartment?
Right.
Did you eventually go back into the apartment with the Milwaukee police officers?
Yes.
And then he was arrested.
Right.
You gave a statement to the Milwaukee police a few hours later?
Yeah. I guess you could say a few hours, yeah.
Ken, how long do we anticipate the cross-examination of this witness?
I'd say at least half an hour, Your Honor.
Okay. That being the case, I think it's appropriate that we take a recess at this time, about 15 minutes. Court's in recess.
Atlantic,
So-
did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, did you see the from the Program to Kill? Did you see any of that series? Because they have the talk show interview where he talks about how. Well, I don't know. I'm assuming that he's going to also talk about it in the courtroom. It's been years since I listened to the court. Yeah, but where he talks about where the police returned. They made him go back to Dahmer's apartment. Can you believe that?
You know what? The more that I'm learning about the Milwaukee Police Department, I'm getting a better understanding of.
Yeah.
This is a good example of what institutionalized racism looks like. People are always concerned about the white person's calling you the N-word inside of Walmart. I'm not worried about that white person. I'm gonna still cuss your ass out, but I'm not worried about that white person. I'm worried about the white people that can control my safety. And this is a good example of how the police basically failed on purpose. Now, I don't know if I completely buy the package that they knew that he was like a sleeper cell, or not even a sleeper cell, just an active murderer, and they just looked the other way. Some people are saying that. I think it's more just gross incompetence, but I think you have a different perspective. So tie the MK Ultra things together, because I'm still not really familiar with that side of things.
Okay. As y'all know, now, giving you a quickie, history.com, MK Ultra was a top secret CIA project. Now I'm reading giving you a quick paragraph from history.com. MK Ultra was a top secret CIA project in which the agency conducted hundreds of clandestine experiments, sometimes on unwitting U.S. citizens, to assess the potential use of LSD and other drugs for mind control, information gathering, and psychological torture. Though Project MK Ultra lasted from 1953 until about 1973, details of the illicit program, people are so loud in my house, details of the illicit program didn't become public until 1975 during a congressional investigation into widespread illegal CIA activities within the United States and around the world. So basically, they, with Project MK Ultra, now MK standing for mind control, control being spelled with a K in German. It said that there were Germans trying to create these ultimate soldiers who would kill without any sort of sympathy, empathy. You know, if they had to assassinate you, your family, your children, your cat, with no sort of feeling, emotion, someone who could not be easily interrogated, who could sustain torture. That's what they were trying to create, using whether they used psychological torture, physical torture, shock treatment. And these are techniques that go way beyond, go way back. These techniques, they go back to ancient times, even like to ancient Egypt, such techniques. And supposedly after World War II, there were these Nazi scientists who were part of the MK Ultra program. They were like, it's said that they were brought, this is what's said. Now, this isn't, okay, totally confirmed, but this is the so-called conspiracy theory. No, but a lot of it's real. Like when you look up Operation Paperclip and all of that, it was said that there were, these scientists were brought to, like about at least 50 of them brought to the United States and also like Canada. And okay, even though the CIA, they could no longer perform these activities supposedly in around 1975, the conspiracy so-called theory is that they have continued to conduct these experiments. And what I have found in doing my research, I had found out that, like, in looking at our most notorious serial killers, right, the most well-known, now I'm not going back to Jack the Ripper, but our most notorious serial killers, I found, okay, I had discovered that many were born around or after World War II. Also, I have found that the most notorious known, at least talking about the United States and Canada, I noticed that the most notorious that we know of, about over 90% were in the military. I had like military connections. And I don't think this is a coincidence. I'm going to tell you what I believe now that some time has passed, and overlooking that whole thing, considering how was it that Jeffrey Dahmer, he was able to get, because those were some decent apartments over there. Okay. I know they put it to you. Yeah, it was a black neighborhood, but it wasn't this as terrible and crime ridden as they're making it seem. It wasn't that far from Marquette University, but it was a black neighborhood. Okay. Yeah. And there was some crime. Don't get me wrong. But not like where you're worried about bullets flying through the window or something like that. No, it wasn't like, you expect drive-bys and stuff. But yeah, just basically working class, neighborhood. My family was 2 blocks. But considering that,
so it wasn't really the projects. It wasn't
the
hood.
Hell no.
It wasn't anything like that.
You could type in the address and look yourself. No, it was not. Maybe because I'm actually from the projects, Cabrini Green, and I'm from I'm from Chicago. What some people see is, I'm looking at that like, those were some decent apartments, okay, over there. Okay, like where we were at, we were on 24th and Wales. Come to find out, he was in 2 buildings he happened to live in 2 buildings those Oxford apartments. You can look at the pictures of his apartment. Those were decent apartments. Okay, yeah. See, and understand, my mom was a widow and stuff,
I also want to point out, when it comes down to affording those apartments, he did not have, he was a phlebotomist for a little bit, so he had some kind of income, but his father was helping, subsidize most of his bills. So there was income from different angles, because if he had to pay for all of that, he wouldn't be able to afford to live even in this black neighborhood.
Yeah, and I will say, though, it is easier to live. The cost of living in Milwaukee is much more inexpensive. I will say that. That's why you had people, flock coming to Milwaukee, like from Chicago and neighboring cities, and because I will say that, but yet those were some decent apartments over there. They still are. And that's why there's been a thing of, white, like Marquette University, they've been trying to gentrify that area. Those were the Oxford apartments, from what I recall, they were some decent. The apartment building we were in was a decent apartment, especially when I compare it. Like if you were to compare it to a lot of apartments in Chicago, and I'm sure New York City, trust me, those were some decent apartments. Yeah. And you saw, if you look at the pictures in his apartment, especially considering he's a single young man, but you gotta question, this guy had been arrested for kidnapping and molesting a 13-year-old. Yeah, he was 13. It was Conorak's, I think, younger brother. Conorak was the Laotian boy that he killed.
Conorak was actually older. It was because his younger brother was 14 when he was
No,
actually
Conorak
murdered.
was 14. Conorak he was 14. He was
Right,
only
when he was
14 years old. Yeah, he was 14. I forgot
So
exactly
it was his
what
older
age.
brother. It
But
was
yeah, it might have been an older brother, but I know that his brother was still underage. He wasn't 18. His brother, yeah, he had been, I think that brother might have even been younger than him. I do recall. I know for sure that Conorak was 14, because this was, you can imagine the Milwaukee News at the time. So yeah, I'm surprised I can't pronounce his last name, because I heard it so much. It was, yeah, I remember all the protesters and everything. I remember, walking through all the protesting when I, wasn't in a group home visiting with my family. Yeah. But he was able to get this job at Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, decent job, where my uncle worked. Yeah, he was okay. And I know from when I was a runaway at that time, and me just being lost, and the police coming up to me, and in seconds they had typed in my name, and they had suspected that I was still a runaway and all of that. In seconds they were able to pull up like a record. Well, only thing I had did at that time was, like, at the age of a year earlier, I had ran away from home. That was the only thing they was able. But in seconds, anytime police, encounter one of us, they're going to go and they're going to check us out. You know what I'm saying? And all they had to do when those women had called the police, excuse the squeaky chair, if they would have just, put in his name, Jeffrey, you know what I'm saying? They said this Laotian boy had wandered out of, when Jeffrey Dahmer left to get some beers. Now, he was already attempting to drill a hole in this boy's head. So he was bleeding from his head, and he was already drugged. He was nude, bleeding from his head and from his rectum. He had wandered out of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, like trying to escape, but he couldn't speak, being that he was drugged up. These black females had found him wandering, and they had held him and called the police even. And when Jeffrey Dahmer came back, I think, did the police get there first? I forgot how it was, but they were like, no, we ain't turning him back to you. The sisters like, hell no, because they knew that this was a kid. They knew something was wrong. Like, no, we ain't, So he was able to convince the police that this was his drunken lover, and they just got into it, like they got into a fight or a scuffle. They did nothing to look into anything. Now, for more than one woman to be convinced that this was a child, you can't tell me, okay, he convinced them that he was like 19 years old. That's what he told them. How is it that these women were able to see that this was a child and the police weren't?
What I honestly think with that situation, I honestly think that they didn't give a shit. I honestly think that it was a situation where number one, you're dealing with black females. You have these two white cops. You're dealing with black women. You're dealing with a gay guy and some underage looking Asian kid, because he looked like a kid. And I think the police decided that they didn't give a shit about anything that was going on in that situation collectively. You had a lot of people who were making ignorant statements about AIDS. There was a lot of ignorant shit going on in the 90s. People like to pretend like the 90s was this time of progression, but it really wasn't. It was a lot of carry on from a lot of the ignorance that went on from the 60s and the 70s. So with that being said, I really want to take things back to the whole MK Ultra side of things. So we do know that Jeffrey went to the military. He wasn't there for a very long time, But is that where you feel like he was indoctrinated, he was programmed, or was this something that happened beforehand?
Well, see, that's why I mentioned this, because that was the thing that was suspicious with me with the young boy and them turning him over. Now, yeah, you did hear them laughing over the dispatcher talking about when they said Asian new boy. They think you're hearing them giggling and chuckling like this is funny. And yeah, so of course I just initially thought, okay, racism. They, like you say, they didn't give a shit. But when I look deeper into, now, and watching that, because I said something was just funny about this. So when I checked out, especially after checking out that Program to Kill documentary, and I did my own research, yeah, because they told them women basically to shut the F up, mind your business, talking about the lovers are reunited and you hearing them chuckling and everything. So this wasn't even just about, I believe they knew. I believe that he was planted in this neighborhood. He had cameras in his apartment, not just for his own fetishes, but I believe he was being monitored. It is say, okay, in Germany, come to find out, when he was stationed and when he was in the military in Germany, stationed in Germany, they said that there were 5 women in Germany who were found dead and mutilated. His roommate said that he had came in there covered with blood. And they, yeah, it is believed, and even Germany, after the whole thing broke out with Jeffrey Dahmer in the news, that they had questioned, even though this was overlooked, that those in Germany, they questioned if he had something to do with these women who were killed in Germany. I honestly believe that that Jeffrey Dahmer, from going back to birth, even his mom being given all of these pills. Now, supposedly she had a severe case of morning sickness. I can relate to that. That's why I only had one child. I had serious morning sickness, but she was given all these pills. And you got to remember, now, when exactly was Jeffrey Dahmer born? He was born in the 50s, right? Or like late 50s, right?
Actually, it was 1960.
Okay, 1960. Yeah, perfect timing. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Scanners, horror movie Scanners, but I was talking about that. And, yeah, but I feel that, I don't know, they're just things I question, the problems that his birth mother had from the time she was pregnant. It was said that his father was the quote unquote neighbor that had molested him, that his father Lionel, and yeah, on the talk show that I had shared with y'all, yeah, I had showed where the woman had questioned, yeah, it was said that his father Lionel had been molesting him. His father knew about him having this obsession with dead animals, whatever taxidermy crap that he was doing. I don't believe that they were totally atheists, because if you are atheist, that means you do not believe in or regard anything supernatural. Now, maybe you may see symbolism in certain things, but a lot of he was from a young age. I mean, you got to check that out, part of that series, from a young age. Even though I do warn y'all, because I remember when I initially watched that, they had showed images. I didn't expect to see that. Pictures, from the crime scene, as in, mutilated bodies. I think they took that down though. Yeah, because I hate when they do that. But I believe that he was okay, Milwaukee's a very segregated city. Very segregated city. It was odd that this white guy from Ohio living in this neighborhood. Now, it could have been that's the only place he couldn't be in, and he had a record, but he had been arrested multiple times. He's able to live comfortably. He's in this area. He's from, his family was in West. His family wasn't even in the city of Milwaukee. Okay. And anybody who knows Milwaukee, black side, straight up black side. Okay. He was in this area. He was people complaining about smells. The police had been called in the case now. And the way that they returned this boy to him like that. And do you know that the police officers, even though, after all the protests and stuff, they were supposedly fired. They weren't really fired. They were given a vacation. Those police officers they gave them over $50,000 back pay. Basically, they gave them a vacation. And
I heard that one of the officers is now the chief.
Oh, high ranking. Yeah, high ranking.
I heard that. Yeah,
high ranking. I honestly believe that he was like, as crazy as it sounds, like from child, like he's been monitored, because he was doing things like trying to make these human zombies. I think that they had them cameras. Like, where is that footage? Obviously, there's footage from his apartment. I believe that he had been protected. They've taken care of him. They've covered up for him in Germany. They said that also, the America's Most Wanted, right? John Walsh, the host. What made him, what motivated him to start the show and everything? Or his son Adam Walsh was murdered. His son Adam Walsh was like kidnapped, was abducted from his parents. At the mall or whatever they were at, or department store. It was said that people had called and reported that after the whole Jeffrey Dahmer case broke, that they said that this was the guy that they saw. This was the man that they saw with Adam at the mall or whatever. But I guess this has been regarded. And at first, when I heard this, I was like, wait, Jeffrey Dahmer, he didn't live in Florida. And then come to find out, yes, he did. He lived in Florida. And during that time, and what was that, the early 80s? But
Yeah,
nobody's really looking into that. So this is telling me that this guy has been protected. I believe he was purposely put in this area, and they knew that people wouldn't care if they're Black, Latino, gay. I believe they knew that. And I'm not saying that he wasn't of the XYZ. I'm just saying the way that he was able to get around. Okay, he'd been arrested multiple times. Why was this guy still not in jail? If he had kidnapped and molested a child, how the hell was he that soon out on parole? That does not make sense.
Well, I mean, he is a white man, and to be quite honest with you, they do get slapped on the wrist depending on the state they live in. Now, some states are far more aggressive, but I don't know enough about Milwaukee or Ohio law to make that determination. But we do know that white men do get a slap on the wrist if no one's physically harmed.
Yeah, that's what I initially told myself, but it's just, I think, okay, also, if you ever saw that Fall of the CABAL series, I'm not going to say it because, I don't want to mess with your channel, but they had also talked about that with Jeffrey Dahmer, and he had his victims in that he would mutilate them, behead them, and had them posed in this position that was very similar to this artwork. Satanic artwork, and they said from a young boy, he was obviously into occultism, Satanism. He understood about altars and creating altars and things that he was doing, like rubbing the skulls, almost like for good luck. And this idea, if you consume the flesh, it's going to be, that's not something an atheist, you know what I'm saying? That tells me that he was into occultism. And I questioned things with him and his father, and even his father said he believed that a Svengali or something was behind. I believe that they were monitoring him, whatever he was trying to do and create human zombies or whatever. I believe that he was being monitored. They wanted to see how far he would go, because you got to remember, man, and I'm telling you, Wisconsin, I found out, well, they claim that it's a hotbed for Satanism. I had found this out in doing some research, and it's like, I know people, loved ones of mine, and I lost my brother under mysterious circumstances in prison. Yeah, I know it's like people I know who went to jail in Milwaukee versus going to jail in Wisconsin versus going to jail in Illinois. It's like they come out not the same. They have a lot of these so-called mental treatment facilities, like on this Watertown Plank Road. I know from when I was in group homes on Watertown Plank Road. I believe that they do. Yeah, because you'll see there's a lot of people. There were, like, when we came to Milwaukee, there was a lot of crazy kind of people. Now, I expect this with the homeless and people on drugs, in Chicago, but there wasn't really, there's not really like a homeless problem like that in Milwaukee, or at least there wasn't then. You know what I'm saying? But yet, for some reason, you got people that's walking around. I can't explain what I'm saying, but I know from being in I was in a child lesson treatment system, when I became like a runaway and stuff, and the things that I'm gonna just tell you that, and when I think of my family, I can't get too personal on certain things, but there's just certain things with loved ones of mine. And if you notice in my chat room, there was some people, they were kind of co-signing because it's like they know what I'm talking about. It's like we can't go too much into it, but I'm just gonna put it. I think Wisconsin is a very wicked state. It's a, first I just saw it as racism, and it's all connected. Yeah, I mean, it's all connected. And I said maybe because the people are of German descent. So a lot of the people are of German descent. And
actually, people in Germany are pretty accepting of
that's
Black
what my
people.
friend told me.
And I also want to put it out there. This is super important for me, though. Like my grandfather came from Germany and married a woman of color. So clearly, they don't have those same views on. No, bear in mind, he came before World War II. So like the attitude towards race was very different in Germany. Even sexuality, they were pretty progressive. It's weird what happened in Germany. But go on about Milwaukee, because I've heard some weird stuff about Wisconsin.
My friend who was in the Gulf War, during Desert Storm, I remember she was telling me, no. That's what she would tell me. Because I was like, that was the only thing I could come up with. Because, the white folks in Chicago, yeah, there's racism, but, so they just seemed cool. It just seemed different, in Milwaukee. Many of them are of German, descent. Like German Fest, that's a big deal in Milwaukee, and beer, and the pubs and all of that. And bratwurst, they love bratwurst in Milwaukee. That's why I first taste bratwurst. And I remember they kind of shut the city down when the German chancellor came to town. So I was like, yeah, but it's a very like I said, it's a very segregated city. Now I know what people like. Well, you from Chicago? How can y'all talk? No, it's still different. It's not what people think in Chicago. People choose to be. You know what I'm saying? If you choose it, if you go on the north side of Chicago, it's very diverse. In Milwaukee, it is that way. You must. You understand what I'm saying? It's not written in stone, but you know that you're not going to get this apartment on the west side of Milwaukee. You know what I'm saying? You know this. Yeah, you may see like that white female, like my friend who's biracial, and her, but she's her mom is like now part of this Black community or whatever. You may see that. I didn't last time I visited. I noticed like there were more. I saw more biracial people. I was noticing that, but yeah, it's a very segregated city. It's not like there's still a lot of diverse areas in Chicago, like on the north side. But it's a very, I don't think it's necessarily it's separated by choice. It's like, and the Latinos are definitely on the south side, Black people definitely on the north side, white people primarily on the west side and east side. It's very much like that. And and then it's like the Black people I had a problem with too, because they just seem, it's like they seemed unaware. They don't know anything on their history. Please, if you're from Milwaukee, I'm not trying to put you down. But I just noticed the Black folks there, they comfortable. It's an easy city to live in. I'll say that. But it's like.
I don't know much about Milwaukee, but what I do know about just the American experience is a lot of these neighborhoods were redlined. People were redlined into these neighborhoods. So it's almost like they got used to being in those neighborhoods. They became historically Black neighborhoods. You've mentioned that it was easier to live there. There was a lot of social programs that made it possible for those people to survive, thrive almost. In many cases, thrive. So I can see how those neighborhoods became the way they were and how they stayed that way. And now we're seeing weird stuff with gentrification. But just to turn a quick left turn, because I don't want to have this stream go too long, I do want to talk about the reaction to this entire series, because the reaction online has been mixed. So I want to show you something that Nyla says, Nyla vibes, or whatever. I'm not a big fan of her content because all roads lead back to Black men suck.
She bite off a lot of my videos. I know y'all don't believe me, but when I started talking on MK Ultra years ago, that's when she started talking about it. But
all roads can't lead back to Black men suck, though. That's the issue. She's
an agent. She may be an MK Ultra agent. Yes, I said.
If she's an agent, she's a lower tiered agent. And honestly, I think her days on YouTube, well, she'll still be around, but I think her relevancy is drying up. So let's go to one of her awful takes of this entire situation.
Oh
So
gosh,
she
no.
says, there are not less than 9 movies about Ted Bundy. I have respect for the families and victims of Jeffrey Dahmer, and I empathize about their loss and their pain. But some of these conversations about what shouldn't be showing is really silly to me. Collectively, we act like special needs children about everything. This is why we can't be real about the actual history, because the truth somehow upsets Black people. Serial killers and the culture surrounding them are a part of American history and culture. Lil Boosie or no one else is going to stop the Americans from replaying these events through film, books, and songs. Is it macabre? Perhaps. But I can tell you that there's nothing new under the sun, and communicating this simple fact to a group of people who want to equate every fucking thing imaginable to some sort of collective trauma is stifling, and I'm over it. First of all, you sound dumb. Let's start
Oh
there.
my gosh, why are you
Let's try.
reading?
Like, it's the way that she speaks about Black people. First of all, sweetheart, I know you're significantly darker than you show in your pictures. You look very washed out. You look lighter than me, and I'm actually mixed race. I've seen pictures of what Nyla looked like before she became Nyla on YouTube. She's a brown-skinned woman. So when I see a person do that, that tells me everything I need to know about them. That tells me I've never been the person that worries about, I get darker in the summer. Good. I like being cinnamon. It's all good. It's not going to kill me. The fact that you are using your computer to wash out your Blackness while you're waving your finger at Black people over the internet tells me everything I need to know about you. You use a mammy. You're the mammy to white supremacy, and you need to move along. And the funny thing about this whole situation, this isn't going to age well, because when Tommy Sotomayor was taken down, they took their time. Black women, they actually are more, they're quicker to get rid of Black women off YouTube than they are Black men. I've noticed that. They were trying to make Kevin Samuels a serious, player prior to his death. I don't see them making Cynthia G a serious player, because she's pissed off people who are pro-choice, and she's pissed off people who are pro-life with her stupid stances on abortion. So it's one of those things where it's like they're going to allow her to be the little ghetto marionette that they'll let bounce around on stage for a little bit, but she'll never make that crossover, and they'll have some new, internet heifer with bad takes, just like with Tommy Loren. Have you heard from her lately? Or Ann Coulter? We'll get a new, internet heifer to annoy us at some point. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Nyla, and there's potential in her, because I'm gonna tell you, these people are very intelligent. They're very intelligent. Her and Cynthia G, Synergy, as I call her. They're very intelligent. Because y'all had got me with I was definitely done after learning that she did a video on Emmett Till, and she's trying to demonize him through the claims against his father. I didn't listen to it. Y'all told me about it. I said, let me type in her name, and I saw the topic title. I said, no, because if I listen to this, I'm gonna end up coming up in here doing the streams. Because she was talking about she was gonna drag hoes, talking about she gonna drag. She was referring to me, right? Because it was interesting when I talked about the Moynihan report, but I wasn't talking about it for the same reasons they were. That's when Cynthia G and her start talking about it. So when I went up in there and kind of was like, interesting. You guys are talking about it right after I was talking. And so then that's when, her and Synergy, because see, I peeped them. I'm telling you, there's so much that I could expose. Like a lot of this stuff that Woman Sphere had brought up on Nyla says, I already knew this stuff on her. But I said, hey, you know what I'm saying? That's why in my one video, I was like, how's that salon on 63rd going? See, Nyla know what I'm talking about. And see, I'm from Chicago. She know what I'm talking about. And notice how, she ain't had shit to, even though she said she was going to come back dragging O's and responding to me. Because I'm telling you, when we talk about MK Ultra, that's another thing that I was talking about. And I could have straight up went there on Synergy. Beta sex. See, also, these mind control techniques were not only used to try to create these super soldiers, these Rambo types, if you will, that kill, when in doubt, kill or whatever, but also sex beta monarch programming when you learn about that. And so when there's been things, now I ain't gonna lie, Woman Sphere, she brought out some stuff that I didn't quite know. Well, I knew that I knew about the white husband and all that. I didn't know, you know, and I could feel sorry for old girl, but I'm telling you, there are certain people who have been planted in social media as mouthpieces, and to find out at such a young age, I'm telling you, there are certain people, they have been groomed for this. If you understand what I'm saying, what I had found out on Synergy, the Erotics Arts Festival, y'all may not know what I'm talking about, you know, because I haven't really shared all of this. But yeah, I'm just saying, I'm gonna put it like this: we got agents. This stuff is real. When you do your research and do your yeah. Oh goodness, why you get me on this?
I just feel like I hear you. I do believe.
Woo!
I do
Let
believe
me
there
not
was
even look.
definitely a grooming process. I don't know if I necessarily believe that Cynthia G and Nyla are some agents. I feel like they're too ratchet to be any type of like agent. To be quite honest with you, no, I'm not saying that they're unintelligent. I just don't think they're sophisticated enough to actually be. You know, like I can't see them in too many different platforms outside of YouTube, outside of that angry black side of YouTube.
Well, of course, considering how far, especially as Cynthia G, look, but she is she or is she not on Fox Panel? Consider how many people
it's an internet show still, though. It's still a YouTube. It's not like she's on Fox News.
That's more people are watching YouTube, though. Think about it. More people are watching YouTube than they are watching television now. She has got, even I subscribe, the Radical Sister.
That is true.
Think about it. How many of us had at one time subscribed to Cynthia G? I was subscribed to her, you know, and you know, I now.
But like with Tommy Sotomayor, it's one of those situations where yes, I was subscribed, but at this stage of the game, I'm asking myself, all right, are you still on board? And honestly, many of us had made that call months ago or years ago that we're not on board. So if you're still on board, that means you're going to overlook the hateful things she said about Emmett Till. Anytime there's something that happens in the news, Cynthia, Nyla, and Taz, they all have awful takes. And they always find a way to basically say black men are bucks and white women are awful and black women just need to hook up with white men and then all the problems are going to go away. Meanwhile, Nyla is with Taz, who looks like every fucking criminal mugshot I've ever seen in my entire life.
Well, you know,
and you got Cynthia G, who's involved with that individual Storm Monroe, who is apparently some type of bisexual, you know, prostitute of some sort. So you have these people who are involved with just these shady individuals, and they're trying to wag their fingers. Put that ashy ass finger away. You can't wag it at anyone at this stage of the game. But I do want to go through one quick thing before we wrap up the stream. I do want to show you this thread that really pissed me off. So hold on one second, because this is you're not going to be happy about this. Okay, if you guys don't know, I'm more active on Twitter, so definitely follow me on Twitter because that's where you're gonna get most of the juice, honestly. So this individual, this is a gay individual. He wrote, "Not even gonna hold y'all. He probably would have got me too," right? Implying that he just thought that he was so attractive that he would literally let this nigga murder him and eat him because. Now, this is some mammy and shit that I feel like we overlook within the gay community, especially with the gay black men, because you see this type of stuff and they're still kind of. But what I do appreciate is that mostly everybody got on his ass. Like mostly everybody was kind of disgusted by what he said. And of course, I had to.
I'm looking at all the likes. Do I see over 400 likes though?
My response.
You know why? You're a coon. You're a nigga.
So that was my response to the stream was because only a coon would say some shit like that, but generally everyone else had a.
You hear what you're saying out loud, brother? You hear what you're saying
like
out
people
loud,
were not too happy about.
I don't know what's going on. Hey!
So there, if you look at his likes, he had under 500,000 likes, but most of the people who are disagreeing, they're getting more likes. So most of the attitude was, for example, the fact that you posted this disgusting tweet speaks in volumes. It really does.
And this was this black, or do you know if this person was black? You know, I'm asking.
Of course he was. Like this Andy from Atlanta, Georgia. Like this is the I checked it out. Y'all know how I do. I'm very thorough when it comes down to checking out some things. But yes, unfortunately, he was definitely.
You know, I'm gonna tell
one of us.
He might be a Zoomer. I'm gonna tell myself because that's what I want to believe. He was paid to, because I believe nothing goes viral coincidentally. Even if, oh my gosh, Lord, I know that
Ain't
Black
no way, man.
AKA Mad Black TV. I know that he did a video saying that there were, I guess black people saying that he's attractive or something. Now I remember back when this happened, there were white women that was sending. They were claims that there were white women sending him love letters. They found him to be a sexy, like Ted Bundy, attractive serial killer or whatever.
Oh, really? They thought the receding hairline,
back then,
the glassy eyes, and
that's what I'm
obvious
saying.
incest look. They thought that was hot. Okay, all right.
It's like almost like they were trying to have him look a certain way. You know what I mean? In Milwaukee, it has started a lot of tension because they would have him after he was arrested, they would have on the cover of Milwaukee Journal, that was like that's the main newspaper in Milwaukee. They would have a picture, a nice, loving family photo of Jeffrey Dahmer. And, usually with us, it'd be a mugshot. You know what I'm saying? Usually with a serial killer, you're not going to see a family photo on the cover of, man, I don't know. But you know what? I bet you that was a Zoomer, wasn't it? I don't mean it's thickness. I bet you that was a Zoomer. I don't know.
I actually think it was either a late, like an early millennial, like some millennial in their late 20s or early 30s, because he didn't look super young based off of what I could see. Way too grown to be saying some shit like that.
They've entered their 20s now. So Zoomer's like, as old as like 24, 25 now, right?
Yeah, but he looks like he was closer to 30 than to 20, if you get my drift. Like, I didn't get his exact age, but that's what I was thinking. But just the notion of, I feel like, going back to what I was saying earlier about the fact that these people were going to this man's apartment with all these red flags, and these are black people. I feel like people who are black or black adjacent, even biracials, there's almost this kind of, I don't know. I don't want to fall under the magical Negro stereotype, but I do feel like there is something in us, like this discernment, when we know there's something off. Like when we know that there's something not okay about the situation. And for people to ignore that discernment, or maybe they just didn't have it, I don't know. But I just feel like there was too many red flags for people to follow this person. And I feel like they would have been more skeptical if it was a black person. And the fact that he was able to be repelled from the white gay community, and they got his ass the fuck up out of there. He wasn't allowed to go to any of the bars, any of the bathhouses. That was all done. He was able to go to the black community and off plenty of people. Didn't the rumor get around? Didn't people talk? It's just I can't understand how it happened for so long.
They didn't know that this guy had killed because he would dismember, and they didn't know. Only thing that was suspecting people missing and smells in this coming from this apartment building. I'm going to assume, because there's no way that those smells, if it smelled like what I smelled in that building, there's no way that smell could have lingered. It had to have been a thing of where he was able to get rid of the smell and it'll come back or something like that. There's no way that because they wouldn't have even been able to live in that building if it continued to smell like that. There's no way they would have passed out if it was the smell like what I smell. But because I noticed that you'll see Jeffrey Dahmer, one minute he looks like his hair is blonde, like a light blonde, and then the next you'll see his hair as if he perhaps was dyeing his hair or whatever. I
think there was some of that going on. I do believe the family worked on his image when he was in front of he was in front of the media at this point, and they were really trying to sell this all-American boy. Nah, this nigga was out here.
Yeah.
Period.
Because it was like
So-
1 minute he'd be looking all crazy, and then next he's looking like Sting or something, you know. So I'm assuming, and being that, yeah, and then 1 minute he'll look like when you saw what you were just showing, you know, with Tracy Edwards giving testimony. Now there he looked like he could be like, you know, over 34 years, you know, could be 34, 35, but you know, then other times they initially they would be showing that he would look like he was like maybe 27 or something. You know what I'm saying? So I'm assuming, being that we have this, and this was in the early 90s, and it's not like, you know, in black neighborhoods, you know, I'm thinking that perhaps there were those who found him to be attractive, and people having their ideas of what they think a serial killer would look like some guy that looks great, what they, you know, and they trusted him. I guess him saying that, oh, he would say things like, oh, I'm working on a film, or I'm a photographer. And if he came off as clean cut and stuff, as yeah. And if they saw him as attractive and relatively young looking, you thinking, well, especially if you're just thinking some money, and maybe there were those who were attracted to him and wanted to spend time with him. The thing is, I'm wondering, how was his conversation game? You know what I'm saying? Was he, because me seeing the footage of him at his dad's house and the way that he was erratically turning the papers and all of that.
He looked awkward as fuck. He looked awkward and weird.
Yeah.
I honestly think a lot of times people in this, I'm not trying to sound like Cynthia G, but sometimes there are black people, when a white person comes around, they stand up a little straighter and they're like, oh, I'm getting attention from a white person. Let me overlook all of these other red flags that we're seeing. I think that played a factor in it. I'm not trying to diminish the experience of the victims or try to say, you know, well, you had it coming type shit. That's not the energy. But I do think it is an opportunity for us to reflect on when we see the white community making moves. You don't have to act like they're like your boss automatically. Even if it's a passive situation, I've seen it in the workplace where people will literally elevate a white employee in their mind. Even like, this isn't even a manager. They're elevating this person in their mind because this person is white. I'm like, you're a whole nurse and you're listening to this BHT because they're a white person. I've seen a lot of that with the people who are non-ADOS, but that's a different conversation for another day.
Believe it or not, I had a white gay friend. This was over 15 years ago, y'all. Okay. And I'm helping him get a job and everything. He was my friend's friend, you know. She used to like going to gay clubs and stuff, you know, hanging out with gays. But he was like one of the white dudes, thought he was black and stuff. I remember I had trying to get him to get some work, and it was these black employees doing all these interviews. And I noticed how they saved him for last. I'm like, when they going around to us? We've been here. Because they saved him for last, because now this was a male and a female who were hiring at this. It was like a Long John Silver. They saved us, or him, my friend at that time, for last, because they knew that they were going to hire him. They came over talking to him like, oh, so when can you start? So that's why they hurried up and interviewed all these other black people. They knew that they had it set that they were going to hire him.
And that's how institutionalized racism works. It's like they know that there's a secret code or a secret way of doing things. And that's why it's almost, you got to put yourself in a position where you can't be as vulnerable to these things. But honestly, the higher you go, there's still versions of the same situation. I think I want to do a stream about how deep institutionalized racism goes, because it even goes as high as celebrities. You can be very rich, you can be a very powerful black person or mixed race person, and they'll remind you that, guess what? Because of your racial status, there's still white people with equal money or more money above you. They can remind you where you fit in this situation or where you fit on this caste system. But I do want to wrap things up because we have been going for over 2 hours. I want to thank you, Lasheed, for coming in, giving context. Not only were you a person that was there, but you were a person who I feel like you look back at these historical events with a critical eye, and I really appreciate your contribution to this entire stream.
Thanks so much. Thanks for listening. At first, it was kind of hard listening to his testimony, and I was getting, oh man. But yeah, this is actually becoming therapeutic because this was very. But thanks y'all for listening. I appreciate it.
And we'll be doing some more streams probably next week. It's been a very busy week for me as we get close to midterms. Next semester, I'm going to have significantly more free time, so I'll be able to do more of these videos with you. So enjoy the rest of your night. God bless.